Hello all my students, welcome to my channel. Today we are going to discuss about nature of learning. It is an important chapter because it's not just useful for your exam but it is useful for your life. So let's see what it is. Meaning and definition of learning. According to Gates, learning is the modification of behavior through experiences. And Crow said that learning is the acquisition of habits, knowledge, and attitude. So, any relatively permanent change in your behavior brought by an experience can be considered as learning in behaviorism. Learning can be a modification of behavior or acquisition of new habits, knowledge, or attitude. And according to cognitivism, they think or they consider learning as an active mental process through which we acquire and remember and use a knowledge. Even if you are passively, not actively, passively listening to something, maybe a song, you might not be able to remember its lyrics. But when you actively, with all the conscious, listening to a song or doing an activity or repeating it, you may find that you are acquiring the lyrics or you are learning the lyrics. And even if you remember or recall the lyrics also, it will be very easy. So without an active mental process, learning won't happen successfully. And according to constructivist, it's the process of building, understanding, and making sense of an information. So it's the processing of information through which you can build understanding and you can use it in the required situations. Simply, you can say learning is a behavioral modification or acquiring new habits and behaviors. If you look at learning and its nature, you can see that learning is a permanent change in behavior. Once you learned it, then it will be quite difficult to unlearn it. And it brings some amount of changes in your behavior. Suppose you are having a habit of waking up at 4 o'clock. Now, after some time, even if you are not putting an alarm, then you would be waking up at 4 o'clock. So, your brain is learning to waking up at 4 o'clock or wake up at 4 o'clock. Similarly, if you have learned how to ride a cycle in your younger age, then even after years, you won't able to forget that. When you get a cycle, though you feel like, oh, I have forgot that, but still you would be able to reproduce the same result. You would be able to ride the bicycle again. But suppose you are not in a healthy condition, like you may be having a fever or you may be having some tiredness or exhaustiveness, then this physically not being fit can have an influence of your learning. Simply, when you are in a fever or when you are having fatigue, you might have noticed that you won't be able to remember or recall the things you already knew. It happens due to your physical illness. Or maybe when someone is drunk, you might have noticed that their behavior is different from whom they really are. or they might not be able to drive, or when you're if you somebody's using drugs and all, they won't be able to do the things as they could. But how we can understand an individual has some knowledge? It's not like in life situations we conduct examinations, or just we conduct in our uh, you know academic process, or we cannot take them to the lab and we cannot check it. So we always indirectly observe the action of the person, and then we learn, oh, he knows it, or he has that learning. So the second point is, learning cannot be observed directly, but it can be done indirectly. And if you practice the learning more and more, you have observed that you will be a an expert in that field. So that's why people say the expert in anything was once a beginner. Say, suppose you are learning piano or organ or a keyboard. So when you learn the notes first, like C, D, E, F, so if you're practicing more, then you know the speed you get, the timing you get is different. But if you're not practicing it and you feel like, oh, it's not my cup of tea and I don't want to do this, then you cannot be an A.R. Rahman, right? So how much you practice and how much you have experience in the field, it matters. If you are experiencing the learning with a prominent personality in that respective field, then the quality of your learning improves, and you are practicing it more, then it improves. Learning is always considered as a process. It's a continuous lifelong process, not a product. Learning involves physical and mental abilities. And why we learn basically? Learning occurs when we have a kind of requirement. Now you are learning these facts about learning because you have to pass an exam, or maybe you are interested in it. So of course, learning makes you learning makes improvements in your personality or in your abilities, and it is essential for the adjustment and adaptations. I have seen people talking about like they will only speak in their mother tongue, but if we are giving an opportunity to them to settle in abroad, you can see that they will they will be speaking in English in few days. Why? Because that is their necessity. So learning always prepares an individual for adjustments and adaptations. And wherever you look at, in whatever country you're moving to, you can see that everywhere this learning happens, and in every age this learning happens. Even from the stage of infancy, you can see that the child is learning. And even now, you look at your parents. When the mobile came, when the touch screens came, they learned it because of the necessity, and it made them adaptive to the current world. So it is universal and continuous. And what are the nature and characteristics of learning? As we have told, learning is likely permanent change in behavior. It's a lifelong and continuous process. It ensures the progress and growth of organism, and it can be observed indirectly, and it is a result of experiences. So if you are making your child or your student to see when baking soda is mixed with vinegar or acetic acid, bubbles are coming out, and you are telling it why it's happening, CO2 is the gas. So that learning which occurs through the experience or that experience itself becomes a learning. And whenever the child sees baking soda and vinegar together, maybe in their fridge and all, they suddenly remembers about the experiment. And when a child touches the fire, then he just withdraws his hand, the finger. Why? Because now he knows, okay, it can burn me. So learning occurs as a result of experience. And it is purposeful and goal directed. Even if you're going, okay, simply when the Google Maps were not there, drivers used to remember all the routes because it is with their necessity. They wanted to drive in the same route and they know every time if they're stopping at every junction, it won't be economical in terms of fuel or time. So they by heart the route. They remember all the path, all the map because they had a purpose and they had a goal. So this kind of purposeful learning mainly occurs for the improvement or adaptation or for adjustment. So when you're in a new society where people are like very kind of workaholic, so just to adapt with the culture, even though you're a lazy person, you pick some motivation because you know you have to survive the, or even if you are in a place where you get only vegetables, not any non-veg, then you will be having vegetarian and you won't have any problem with that. Or if you are moving to abroad, then again you will learn their language. If you are going to France, then maybe you maybe learn French. Or if you're going to Germany and you know that for having a job there you have to learn German, then definitely you would. So it's for the improvement, adaptation and adjustment. And it is an intelligent process. It's not like, okay, without knowing anything you can excel in some field. It involves your active mental abilities. And even if you are not practicing things, the quality of your performance will decrease. So it can be only retained through experiences and practices. And definitely it's a process. Then the next point is the type of learning. The first one comes to this category is motor learning. Motor learning means those types of learnings which require the usage of muscles. For example, when a baby is learning to walk, or when we are riding a horse, or operating a typewriter or a keyboard, then some kind of movement or use of muscles are taking place. This type of learning is called motor learning. And the next one is discrimination learning. It involves an act of discrimination, like when you're provided with black tea and cola, you know, though both are looking similar, you know how they're different, how they taste different. Or when you're provided with a stone and a coin, you know. Or simply when you are provided with a melamine plate and a clay plate, you can discriminate how they are different. That kind of learning is called discrimination learning. The next one is verbal learning. how to use a language, how to use a word, how to use the sounds, or how to write. This is called verbal learning. And next one is concept learning. This is a form of learning which require higher order mental processes like thinking, reasoning, intelligence, and etc. So it helps us to learn a concept, or it involves the formation of a concept. When we look at birds, it's a concept. So the facts contributing to the concept might be like they are having wings, or many of them can fly. So again, it's a kind of discrimination. It involves so many thinking, so many reasoning, or maybe a rationalization. So all this contributes to concept learning. And the next one is sensory learning. As the name indicates, you can see that it involves a lot of perception and senses. So when you touch something, if you're feeling it cold or hot, or when you smell something and you remember that olfactory your olfactory senses are being activated, then you are learning a new thing. You know how jasmine smells and how different it is from that of a rose. Or you can identify aromas of different perfumes. So these are belongs to sensory learning. Next comes learning of principle. So this type of learning mainly occurs when you are preparing for, or when you are learning something like science or maths, or when you're preparing for exams. So uh, when we are talking about Newton's law, or mm, something else like how this uh, maybe formula, all these things are comes under learning of principles. Or when you say like when you are using is or are, then verb will be followed with the form of ing. So these kind of basic things called principles, when you learn them, it's called learning of principles. And sometimes you won't be able to understand them fully, but still you learn it. So it's called learning of principles. And then next comes problem solving. It is not just the problem solving when you do during the examination, but it's also a ability to solve your daily life problems. So it involves reasoning, observation, imagination, thinking, generalization, etc. And it's a higher order learning process because you are applying the things you have learned, and you are understanding how you can solve a problem using your former experiences or existing knowledge. And the next one is paired associate learning, PA learning. Simply, PA learning is something where you associate two words together, kind of stimulus response times. So when you provide with a word or a name, okay, let's take an example. When I say Sachin Tendulkar, suddenly the word cricket comes to it. Or when you say one of your aunt's name, then suddenly you remember of your uncle's name. Or when I say um, ocean, you may think about a ship. Or when I say the word um, for even if you're considering an example like in your childhood, and if you're having some small babies around you, when you say the word or the letter A, then suddenly they say apple. So that kind of learning is called paired associates learning. But normally it occurs, or it connects two words, and it acts as kind of stimulus response stuff. Next is variables of learning or factors affecting learning. Here there are three subcategories to it, three types of variables of learning. They are individual variable, task variable, method variable. So these variables, these are the factors which influence the process of learning or the quality of learning. The first factor is individual variable. Individual variable means the factors related to the person or the individual which influences the learning. So how matured he is, like whether he can do this task, or if I'm going to teach a 3 years old about Newton's laws or thermodynamics laws, he won't be able to understand. So it's about the age, maturity, and their abilities. So how mature they are, how much they can accept, or how much they can grasp, it plays a role. But age and maturity, they're not exactly the same, because if you look at the class, there will be children who has higher mental capacity or higher maturity than the rest. So you have to remember, the thing is, like, for a when you construct class or when you teach a topic, it mainly considers a generalization. So normally we believe a set of age group. For example, if you're considering LKG, the age group is 4 to 5, and then you are considering about their average maturity and average abilities. So even in the same age group, you can see the children who are very much matured, who are who can do things much better than the others in certain areas. So the rate of learning will be greatest when the maturation condition is most favorable. Then comes age, then comes sex. It is believed that, though it might not be a gender thing, now we are talking like kind of it's gender generalization actually. In psychology and learning, we consider that boys can um, learn motor skills faster than girls, and physical and mental health. So if you're having a strong physical and mental conditions and they are not favoring your learning, then however the teacher try, or however how much experience you are provided with, you might not be able to learn them properly. So it is very important that the learner's physical and mental condition or health should be maintained properly. Then the next thing is abilities and disabilities. Every child is different. Sometimes you will be provided with a bunch of group where you can see the kids with physical disabilities or special children, you can see, or maybe you can see the people who are having high EQ and IQ. So the rate of learning among these children will be different from an average learner. So it is always good to consider their abilities and disabilities before you putting your own expectation on them. And next comes previous experiences. We normally say if a person know how to ride a bicycle, then for him it will be very easy to learn a motorcycle, because the previous experience, the learning he had from the previous experience will support the learning the new skill. So previous experience always matters. And readiness, how much you are ready. And if a kid is not having any interest to learn karate, and how much you try, he is not going to learn it. Or if a kid doesn't want to learn French, how much you push him, how much you give the exposure, he might not be able to learn it because he's not having a genuine interest in it, he's not having a readiness. Then level of aspiration and motivation. Recently when I was talking to my kid, she told me like, Amma, I want to learn dance. So I was so much surprised by her action. I thought like, why suddenly? So she told me when one of her classmates was dancing on the stage, everyone was giving her claps, and after her performance, her class teacher has given her some chocolates, and then again uh, she won the prize, so she got something. My child doesn't know what was it, in colorful wraps. So she wanted to know what's in that colorful wrap. So she told me like, Amma, I want to dance, I want to win the prize, and I just wanted to know what was in the cover. So it was coming from a 5 years old or 4 years old. So it was really surprising, and that was a motivation she gained from the instant, and that was her motivation to learn dance. So if you feel like, okay, you need a particular salary package, and for that you have to learn an additional skill, definitely you would do, because that's your aspiration or motivation. Or if you feel like, I need a social respect, or I want to do something for the society, so how hard it is for you to learn for civil service examination, you will definitely do that. So the individual variables are age, sex, maturation, physical, mental health, abilities and disabilities, previous experiences, readiness, and motivations and aspiration. Then comes task variable. Task variable means how long your task is. Suppose if you have to learn a chapter, then you will check how many pages are there. And then the next thing, difficulty of the task. And if you are provided with your native language, some text in native language with simple concept, and another text which is written in some foreign language with difficult words, so which would you prefer to learn? Of course a simple one which contains simple words, right? Or the language, the concept written in your familiar language. So that's related to the difficulty of task. When the task is more difficult, you take more time to learn. And when the length of the task is more, then again you will be spending more time. Then the meaningful of the task, how meaningful it is. For me, when I'm learning B.Ed and you're telling me like, okay, why don't you learn Arabic now? And you can write Arabic, all your papers in Arabic. Or why don't you learn Tamil now? You can write all the papers in Tamil and it will look different. So I'll be feeling like, if I'm having enough marks by writing my examination in English or my mother tongue, then why should I do that? And it has no meaning for me. At the same time, if you're going to our neighboring state, Tamil Nadu, you can see that if you ask them to learn and write these things in Malayalam or in Hindi, they would say like, why should I do that? So it should be very important, whatever you're teaching them, it should be meaningful to them. There should be purpose behind the task. And another thing to add this meaningfulness to the task is, you can link with your previous experiences. That is why we always begin with an introduction, and we try to bridge their existing knowledge and the knowledge we are giving to them. So it should have meaningfulness. And organization, so here it's a very important thing. So whenever you submit information, there should be an organization. It should be like, that's why we always do this content analysis. So there should be facts, that then you're going to concepts and principles. So you're making gradual progress in the difficulty level. And if you are giving them concept charts, or if you're giving them a table, that would be very easy for the kids to remember and learn the things. So that's what called organization of task. It's better to give a table than 3 pages of essay, because if you're provided with a table, then you can learn the table, you can analyze the concept, and you are able to make that table into 3 or 4 paragraphs or pages. So organization is an important thing in learning. Then comes method variables. So which techniques are using to teach and learn? And there are sufficient methods and number of good techniques are available for each content and each type of subjects. So it is your duty to pick the right one, right method, right technique, so that the child can understand and child can retain the memory for a long time. And the next thing is like amount of revision. How much good you are at something, if you're not revising it, it won't be staying for long with you. So it's good to do revisions, good to do the sufficient drill work, practice, and reviewing, so that you can have good retention, reproduction, and utilization of proper time. And distribution of practices. You should be consistent. If you're learning something and if you're practicing for the next 2 days, and if you're feeling like, okay, I have done enough practice, like last 48 hours I was continuously practicing it, it's not the better way to do the revision. But if you're doing it on all the Sundays or repetitively, once in a week or twice in a week, and if you're doing for 1 month fully, then that will be more beneficial than spending continuously 48 hours on the same thing. So distribution of practice is an important thing to do. Then proper feedback and reinforcement. Suppose your kid doesn't know how to write C. He or she always does the C in an inverted way, like he's writing a mirror image of C, and he's doing it like 100 times or 250 times and repeating it in every week or every month. So even if the amount of revision is there, distribution of practice is there, if no one is going to correct her or correct them, the learning wouldn't be proper. Or someone is learning to drive, so he doesn't know how to do this, how to stop the vehicle in a hillside and start again, because there's a slope there. So he doesn't know how to climb the slope or how to ride through the slopes or slippery muddy areas. So how much he tries without a proper knowledge, without a proper expert's advice, he might not be able to do the task. So it's very important you to be a mentor and give proper feedbacks and reinforcement to enhance the learning, to correct the learning, and to make the learning more meaningful. So it's called method variables. So as a teacher, you might not be able to do a lot of things with individual variables, but you can, when you design a class for a group, the individual variable you can consider, because you should know what is the limit of your class, what is the capacity of your class, and by taking today's class you would be able to understand that. And then you have to design your curriculum or uh, even in a simple level lesson plans according to the capacity of the students in your class. And you should prepare yourself to answer the brightest students questions and doubts, as well as you should be able to explain the concept in simpler terms to the student who has the weakest IQ in the class. And when you design the methods also, task also, you should make sure it shouldn't exceed than the memory span, and you should simplify the task as much as possible and should organize it and should give a meaning which they can relate to. Then about the method, okay, how you're teaching it, if you're taking to the library or if you're taking a field trip, or what method suits them, suits to the content and suits the age group. So or we should take ICT, help of ICT, or shall we take to lab. So these things comes from their age, considering the individual variables of the kids, so and the difficulty level also. So these are the factors affecting learning, and it's called variables of learning. And mostly if you look at the question papers, I'm very sure that you can find more questions in this area, like variables of learning. So be sure with this. Okay, thank you so much. And if you have any doubts, suggestions, please comment on this video. Thank you.